welcome back to another week of Behind the Lens. I'm Debbie Elias, film critic, creator, and host of Behind the Lens, where we go behind the lens and below the line with those movers and shakers, the film and TV and streamer makers, the producers, directors, writers, actors, cinematographers, film editors, sound editors, designers, mixers, production designers, costume designers, VFX gurus, composers, casting directors, and more. Now, this week is a fun week for me, given the two films that we're talking about and the two filmmakers I'm speaking with. It's also a great way to kick off my 44th year as a film critic, although I was published with reviews going back 5 years before that. So yeah, when I tell you all I'm old, and I've watched a hell of a lot of films in all these decades. But this starts 44 years. This is the 12th year of this show, my 44th year as a critic. So, let's move on from that. Today, you'll hear from one of my favorite all-time directors, RENNY HARLIN, as we talk about The Strangers Chapter 3, which now completes his trilogy of the rebooted classic. Now, Rennie and I have only been chatting for, I think, 25, 30 years, somewhere in that range. And I always learn something from Rennie, and I love going in-depth with him on filmmaking, on his films. Then there's writer-director Bryan Fulller, who makes his feature directorial debut with the sumptuous and fun visual feast Dust Bunny. So I'm sure you can already hear it in my voice. I'm very excited about Dust Bunny. So let's get started. First up, RENNY HARLIN is talking about The Strangers Chapter 3. Now, The Strangers began back in 2008 thanks to writer-director Bryan Bertino, who treated us to the tale of James Hoyt and Kristen McKay. They visited an isolated vacation home to enjoy some time together, but their bliss turned into terror, making their stay a bloody nightmare. In 2018, director Johannes Roberts, with a script by Bryan Bertino and Ketai, rebooted the franchise with The Strangers Pray at Night, which starred Bailee Madison, Pullman, and Christina Hendricks. Now, it was always Johannes' intent to do a sequel, but that never panned out. Then we roll around to 2024, and RENNY HARLIN has stepped into the franchise with his own vision. And that became a 3-chapter series, with all 3 films shot at the same time over 53 days of principal photography, with a cast that's led by Madelaine Petsch. Madelaine is amazing in all 3 of the films. Now, in The Strangers Chapter 1, we met the characters of Maya and Rory, and Madelaine plays Maya, our heroine. Their car breaks down in the creepy and eerie mountain town of Venus, forcing them to spend the night in a remote cabin. Panic, of course, ensues, as they are terrorized by 3 masked strangers who strike with no mercy and seemingly no motive. Then, in 2025, RENNY gave us the next chilling chapter, with Madelaine returning as Maya, but joining her this time are, among others, Gabriel Basso and Richard Brake. Now, Chapter 2 picked up the morning after Chapter 1 ended, and we find Maya is the sole survivor of the strangers' murdering spree of the previous night. But as the night's events aren't over, as she must now do everything in her power to survive the continued relentless attacks from the masked killers. Obviously, you can't have witnesses, even if you're masked. The film expanded from just a cabin to the town as a whole and the forested areas, becoming very physically intensive for Madelaine, very tactile, very visceral, relying extremely on incredible cinematography that just blew my mind then. It blows my mind even now. And that is, now I can't find my note. Never mind. I'm just losing paper all over the place here. But now we have the final piece of the puzzle with The Strangers, Chapter 3. Maya is again, she's the last woman standing, and she survived what she thought was the worst of the worst. But now she must move on. It's the morning after the night before. But how does she move on? When she must still face the masked killers one last time in a brutal, full-circle reckoning of survival and revenge. This final chapter is different than the two earlier chapters in that this is very internalized. It is psychologically internalized, not only from Maya, but we learn more about the scarecrow and the guy behind the mask, who is the one who has been terrorizing and murdering and bringing others into his cadre, as even the mass killers have been getting killed. So it's very observational from our standpoint and from Maya's. She does not have much dialogue at all in this film. She watches. She listens. She's held captive again. But she's trying to absorb all that has happened while trying to understand the psyche of these masked psychopathic murderers. Where lighting and lensing were the key tools in the cinematic toolbox for Chapter 2, sound becomes all important with Chapter 3. And Rennie does not avoid silence. Silence is extremely chilling. And that's what Rennie and I focus on in this exclusive interview, because once again, they only gave us 15 minutes of time, and you can't really do an in-depth analysis on the whole film. So we honed in on sound in this interview. And yes, we both complained again about the brevity of time. Highlighting the film's psychological depth and sound design, Rennie emphasizes not only the importance of sound in creating tension, such as a diner scene that is so impeccable, you could hear a pin drop. And of course, poor injured Maya. She stumbles into some underground tunnels that must be at least 100, 150 years old in this old lumber town. You could tell that lumber was the primary business there at one point. And of course, lumber mills and all in many areas of the country have closed up over the centuries. But the sound is so specific. The mix is so well done. You can hear the limp of her one foot on her badly injured leg. And then the slight reverb in this stone tunnel. It's really, the sound is just, design and mix is fantastic. But Rennie also describes the meticulous process of creating sounds and creating the sounds that he envisioned for this film. And it's a very interesting conversation that we have as we get into context and how your own personal context influences the sound that you're looking for. And what Rennie might be looking for based on his sonic experience in life might not be the same as what I would be looking for, because I didn't have the same sonic experiences over my life. Yeah, there are similarities that everyone has, but when you get very specific into certain feelings that you want, so it's really interesting to hear Rennie talk about this. We also delve into the significance of a sawmill location and how that inspired Rennie to alter the story with some very creative additions. We also talk about his use of needle drops. Two incredible songs. He has more than that for needle drops, but the two big ones, and I don't even want to know what it cost in licensing for them. Heart's Crazy on You, which kind of fits all three films, quite honestly, and Nights in White Satin, which comes into both, really enhance the story's impact. But Nights in White Satin, it's got a kind of a seductive sensuality to the scene that goes beyond creepy. So the film's internalized psychological aspects and that seamless integration of sound and visuals is extremely well done. So take a listen as Renny Harlin talks The Strangers, Chapter 3. Hey, Renny.
Hey, Debbie.
I am so happy to be speaking with you again.
You are.
You know, when we talked about Strangers Chapter 2, we really broke down the visual tonal bandwidth and the physicality of you expanding that world. Now in Chapter 3, you really bring in the elements of sound. Your sound is masterful on this one. But we're internalizing within Maya. She was trying to survive in Chapter 2. Now it's, where do I go from here? But you're also filling in the gaps of the past in the town of Venus and these weird people that live there. This is an incredible conclusion to this trilogy, Renny.
Thank you, Debbie. You're the best because I always love talking to you because you're so analytical. You go so deep. You're so smart. You really observe. You are not just, average movie fan. You're like a real cineast, and it's such an honor to hear the things you say.
Oh, well, I've learned so much from you over the years, Renny, and all the times we've chatted. Talk to me about your approach for Chapter 3. You very kindly, for people that have not seen Chapter 1 or 2, we pick up at the end of Chapter 2. People get a flavor if they're just joining the franchise for the first time. But then you go full forward, and then you give us some very key elements of backstory, going back to the youth of Greg, our scarecrow, who everybody knows by now. The scarecrow is named Greg, so it's not a spoiler. But talk to me about your approach for breaking Chapter 3 away from Chapter 2.
Yeah, I have to confess, of course it sounds now like I'm just saying it, but honestly, for me, Chapter 3 was always my favorite because I gained the most distance from Chapter 1, which was, I love Chapter 1, but it was, in essence, like many people said, it was a remake of the original movie. And then I just tried to get away from that and get into my own movie and my own story. And the Chapter 2 was the bridge that took us to Chapter 3, where we can really go full blast payoff with the psychological journey of Maya's character and what the strangers are all about without ruining the mystery, but revealing some interesting signposts about who they are, where they come from. And to me, this chapter was always going to be the most precise and most quiet and most controlled of all of these. Doesn't mean that crazy stuff doesn't happen and there are really, really twisted, dark, violent sequences in this movie, maybe in certain ways more than in any of the other chapters. But at the same time, it is quiet and precise and very psychological. And like you mentioned, I think that sound plays a big part in it. Of course, the visuals as well, but sound, the quietness, the lack of sound, and then just little bits of sound and bigger sounds like the engine of the truck, the stranger's truck, which plays a very central role in this movie. All those things, I try to design them very carefully, and with that in mind, that this movie should be a satisfying conclusion, not just another sequel, but really a payoff for people who have been patient enough to watch these three movies, and also to those who might be new to this, that it still would be an interesting character study of a young woman who refuses to be a victim, even if she's been through hell and back.
Well, you definitely achieved your goal, Rennie. I was, as much as I loved chapter 2 and the visual, visceral nature and how and everything that Jose brought in from with lighting and lensing, this one, I love the internalized psychological aspect of it, as we're now getting to understand exactly how everything transpired, how things have manifested. The Strangers also, it becomes a double entendre in itself as a title with the structure here. But I want to dive into the sound a little more. Your sound editor, Dave Barber, your re-recording mixers, Ben Zari and Dave, the sound is just impeccable. I love when you strip away the sound and we have nothing. You've got your diner scene where Maya's sister and brother-in-law show up. You could hear a pin drop in there. That is scary as hell. When you have that, it's very Hitchcockian. It's scary as hell. Similarly, when we are in these incredible underground tunnels and Maya is walking, she's injured. I mean, she spends the whole third chapter and part of the second limping because she's so injured, the poor girl. But we hear the limp in her footstep. No other sound, but we hear the limp in her footstep. All of this just fuels the tension and the fear of what's unfolding here. How many passes did you do with your guys on the sound mix?
Oh, I mean, again, you're such a connoisseur and such an expert on these things. I could listen to you forever. It's like, oh my God, Debbie, you're like the best therapy for me.
I'm glad.
Because we go through so much, to do this stuff, and with every detail, we care about everything. And it's, we know that your average moviegoer, might not notice 80% of the things we do, but at the same time, they might affect them subconsciously in just the way we intended it to be. But then to hear you point out these things, and these poor sound guys, we beat the crap out of them. I mean, they are great, but we all hear sounds in different ways, and it's even more complicated to explain and communicate than visuals.
Yeah.
And as I'm sure all the listeners know, like in a modern cinema, we recreate pretty much all the sounds. We record sound when we are shooting, and we try to keep most of the dialogue, but all the sound effects, especially in a horror film, are recreated in production. And so if you have a room and the door opens and closes, or you have a door handle, or you have the little peephole that you swing back that little metal lip that is over that hole, or you have a faucet that you open, or a car engine, or the hum of the forest, or whatever it might be. It's like you say that to somebody, and then they come up with the sound that they think is right, and then you hear it. I don't want to seem like this egomaniac who is like, no, it's only one answer, and it has to be just the way I see it or hear it. But at the same time, I have to be faithful to like the thing that I see and hear in my mind, and that leads to situations where even the greatest sound designer might have come up with a certain thing, and then you hear it, and you're like, okay, I get what you're doing, but that's not what I'm hearing in my imagination. And then I use words, like I can say like deeper, fatter, richer, darker, terms to try to describe the sound that I'm looking for. I want it to be meatier. And then I literally like vocalize things like how I want the knock to sound, or the squeaking of the floorboards, or whatever it is. And so these poor guys, they are amazing and they do their best, but I do send them back many times. I try to listen to sounds well in advance, because before we are in the final mix, because then the time is really money, and there's hundreds of tracks of sound that we are mixing together, and it's a little late then to say some sound doesn't sound right, and most of the time the sounds are really a combination of dozens of different sound effects, but it's a process, and I can't say that I'm happy until it sounds just like in my head. It sounds, which comes from my life experience. It comes from the movies I saw when I was 8 years old, or it comes from being at our old summer house when I was 11, and I was walking across the attic, and it seemed scary to me because it sounded a certain way, the dark attic, and now I want to recreate that sound, and it's impossible to describe it to somebody without hearing it.
Yeah, you need that auditory context when it comes to sound, and as you say, not everybody has the same context. And here it's like, I have to say, yes, the engine of the truck, critical with sound. Maya dragging her one injured leg, but we get to the sawmill. Rennie, you and the guys outdid yourselves in the sawmill. When all that machinery turns on, because this isn't just like a wood chipper you might have in your backyard. This is a whole sawmill with all the accoutrement of how you break down logs and everything else, and what you put through these spinning grates. Absolutely incredible sound with the sawmill.
Thank you. We put so much work into that sawmill. I love that location. It's one of my favorite locations.
And it's also the production design in that location and within the sawmill itself. Absolutely phenomenal. And I love your color in there, because we have bright red blood that is spewing around as it does throughout the film, all three films. But then you also, because the equipment is so old and nobody's using the sawmill anymore, you've got that rusted color. So blood and rust kind of all melds together very metaphorically, as akin to what's been happening in this town of Venus for all these years. And that I just thought was so spectacularly interwoven there. Your thought process, your deliberate thought process here is just outstanding, Rennie. Outstanding.
Thank you, Debbie. And that reminds me of because you talk about the history and the rust and all that. There's one detail that shows you the process, which is, as we got the set ready and everything was there, and we come there in the morning to start shooting and putting it all together, and because of all that rusty equipment, and because that feeling of history and the history of the strangers, and this being a central location, that we now realize that this is maybe how they were able to keep doing this, because they disposed the bodies so that nobody ever saw anything. I came up with this thought as I was there. I was like, oh my God, it would be so great if we had some of the belongings of the previous victims. We could just, without a word, just visually tell people the history of what they've been doing. And so I go to the props and wardrobe and I say, do you guys have some stuff that we can put here? Like some old shoes, some jewelry, some watches, like any stuff that could have belonged to somebody, and it's now here. It's left here. They, before they put the body through the chipper, they, just save some of these things as kind of souvenirs. And then, in half an hour, they put all this stuff together, and I picked and chose things and put them out there and shot them. And it just, to me, it became a very intricate part of that set and that story.
It absolutely did. I know they're texting me that we need to wrap up already. They never give us enough time. But I have to mention your needle drops. Heart, Crazy on You. I started laughing. That was so perfect in that scene. And again, your sound with the truck revving and the tires on the gravel roadway. And then Nights in White Satin at that hour 14-minute mark. That scene is so chilling, and it really makes you think and wonder, what the heck is Maya doing? It is just spectacular. Those needle drops really are bullet points in this film.
I love it. Thank you. We worked hard. You know, these were songs in our minds right from the get-go, but we had to really work hard to be able to get them, get the studio to pay for them, because songs are always expensive. And I felt like it was a great victory. We wanted to just juxtapose these images, these sequences with this music, because the music does so much, and it's not like we didn't want it to be cheesy and obvious and stupid and silly and so on, and use it as a crutch. We wanted to use it as a juxtaposition of really, in a chilling way, emphasize of what's going on in the story and in the psychology of the characters, and based on what you say, it sounds like it worked.
I think it definitely did. Renny, another job well done. I hope I get to chat with you next about Deepwater.
You will. It's coming out May 1st.
Oh, my God. I'm so happy.
I am not going to accept anything but yes from you to discuss it, because that's another movie. I bled my heart and soul into it. I will tell them we have to talk for an hour, because I want you to analyze the crap out of it for me.
I will gladly do that for you, Renny. I will.
Awesome, Debbie.
After 30 years of chatting, you're darn right I'll do that for you. Renny, thank you. Thank you so much. And another job so well done. A perfect ending to this trilogy.
Thank you, Debbie. I really, really, really appreciate it. You're the best.
Thanks, Renny, and you go have a great rest of your day.
You too. Take care.
Bye-bye. And that was Renny Harlin discussing The Strangers Chapter 3, which is in theaters this Friday, February 6th. Go see it. I know a lot of people missed out on Chapter 2. Reviews were mixed on it. The beauty of Renny's films, watch them and understand the psychology behind them and the intent and motivation behind what he sees and does from a story and thematic viewpoint. But I think that this is a perfect conclusion to this trilogy. And as you will have just heard from Renny, we'll be talking again in a few months when his next project, Deepwater, comes out May 1st. And as he says, he's going to demand that we have an hour in which for me to do an analysis for him of that film. So we'll see what we can pull off the end of April in time for May 1 in Deepwater. But now we're going to switch gears to a film that I absolutely love, and my conversation with writer-director Bryan Fuller. As I have said ever since first seeing the film back in November, Dust Bunny is a cacophony of creativity and a truly sumptuous visual feast. How the work of production designer Jeremy Reed was ignored by the Academy members in Oscar nominations is beyond me. His work, in concert with that of costume designers Olivier Biraud and Catherine Leterrier and cinematographer Nicole Hirsch-Whitaker, is vibrant, alive, magical. So, his imagination to create a lot of what he does is just mind-boggling. The creativity of this film is off the charts. Now, Dust Bunny may be Bryan's first feature directorial, but he is no stranger to creativity, as he was a writer for Star Trek. And not just one episode or two. How about whole seasons? We're talking Star Trek Discovery, Star Trek Voyager, Star Trek Deep Space Nine, Then there's Hannibal and Pushing Daisies and so much more. So, written and directed by Bryan Fuller, Dust Bunny stars Mads Mikkelsen in such a fun performance. He is so deadpan. He doesn't smile. But he plays a hitman. Sigourney Weaver, and a scene-stealing performance by Sophie Sloane as the precociously adorable Aurora. Now, you're wondering what Dust Bunny's about? Well, 10-year-old Aurora has an intriguing neighbor. Mads Mikkelsen is her neighbor. And he kills real-life monsters. He is a hitman for hire. When Aurora needs help killing the monster that she thinks is under her bed that ate her family, she goes to hire him. Of course, all she has is $27.42, which she stole from the church, the collection plate in a church. She didn't know where else to get money. When Aurora needs help killing the monster that she believes ate her family, she has to beg him, because he thinks she's just a little kid who's nuts. But then, suspecting that her parents may have fallen victim to hitmen that were gunning for him, he guiltily agrees to take the job. Of course, I don't remember seeing him keep the $27.42, but I may have to see the film for a fourth time to check that out. To protect Aurora, he'll need to contend with an onslaught of assassins, a mysterious associate with killer heels. Of course, that's Sigourney Weaver. And he must accept that some monsters are real in this fantastical and wickedly inventive feature. There is one beautiful metaphor happening here within the story itself. Their analogies. It's a stunner. Now, Dust Bunny, it fuels creativity and imagination, not only in Bryan, but in anyone watching this film. Now, as you're going to hear in this exclusive interview, we go deep into the film's visuals and creative elements, and visual references and themes to things like Maurice Sendak's works, Where the Wild Things Are, and of course, Looney Tunes, Wile E. Coyote, and Roadrunner. There's a lot that's going to remind you of Wile E. Coyote and Roadrunner. Now, emphasizing the importance of imagination and creativity, Bryan also discusses his own childhood influences, which come bubbling forth here. Giving lots of love and praise to his collaborators, notably many of whom are women, we break down color, lighting, lensing, production design, costume, even a whimsical score that plays in with color and costume. It's just fantastic, but everything is designed to maintain Aurora's POV, a little 10-year-old's POV, and lots of things that are coming up under the floor, under the bed. And we also have a few thoughts on the film garnering an R rating versus a PG-13, which I believe it should have been, because this really is, it's a fun film for the whole family. Kids will love it, because of the imaginative visuals and the story. Who doesn't want to ride a brass hippo ottoman with a stick pony as their paddle up and down the hall of their house, of their apartment? I'd want to. But, how can you not want to see a film premised upon a little girl hires a hitman to kill the monster under her bed? That right there, I'm sold. So take a listen as writer-director Bryan Fuller takes us through Dust Bunny from inception to all of its visual splendor. Well, Bryan, I have to tell you, I am so excited to get to speak with you about Dust Bunny. I had wanted to talk to you for the theatrical release, and that fell flat, so I'm happy that that someone could circle back to me now, because I have to tell you, I am in love with this film. It is a sumptuous visual feast. It is, quite honestly, a cacophony of creativity on every level.
Thank you.
And I love the structure. I mean, this is a perfect kids movie.
I think so. That we set out to make a kids movie, and I think because of my love of horror, I didn't know I was going to be getting an R rating, because I thought, like, okay, no blood, no foul language, no nudity, we'll be fine. But whoops.
MPAA missed the boat on this one.
Yeah.
A PG-13.
Not so.
Because this truly, as I'm watching this, all I kept thinking was Roadrunner and Wile E. Coyote and Looney Tunes.
Well, thank you for saying that, because we said Looney Tunes so often with regard to the violence. And that's why I was surprised that we got an R rating. It was really the toothbrush that got us the R rating. But there's something about those Looney Tunes films growing up, or the Looney Tunes stories growing up, that are so violent, that are so over the top. And we kind of became inured to that level of violence and forgot that we're waking up in a new era where everybody is sort of helicopter parenting and terrified at their child being exposed to anything out of the ordinary, that they forgot to just let them have fun.
I equate Dust Bunny, especially with your visuals. This is like Maurice Sendak on
thank you.
On crack. It is vibrant, it's alive, you've got monsters. Some are good, some are bad. Aurora, you look at her stuffed animals, they're all monsters. They all have great big eyes. The design of our monster under the floor, our Dust Bunny, quote unquote, very Maurice Sendak.
Thank you. I love Where the Wild Things Are. I love the design of those monsters. And I love any story that gives credence to our imagination and allows imagination to become physical and real. And I hate in a story when you think that something is real and you say, no, it was just in their head. That's always heartbreaking to me, because I'm like, I understand what's real and what's not real. So in a movie, I want everything to be as real as it possibly can, because where else are you going to be able to experience that?
That's just it. And, one of the great things about Dust Bunny is that it lays the groundwork. It sows the seeds of creativity and imagination. And that's something that is so lacking today in the younger generations that are coming up. They have, their sense of imagination and creativity has been squelched. It's like, okay, just go to an electronic device and it's just going to do something magically for you. It's going to do your AI pictures and all. No, do this tactile. This is very tactile. I mean, you just are brilliant, Bryan. For my money, you're brilliant.
Oh, thank you. I think I had the blessing of growing up in the 70s and 80s, where we didn't have a lot of parental supervision. It's also sort of like the dawn of cable TV, where there were things on your television that were R-rated and, not suitable for all audiences, but all audiences had access in a way that we weren't so strict with what we were consuming. And I remember there were so many perceptions of my love of horror as a child. I was obsessed with Fangoria magazine, and so many teachers, so many adults told me that it was sick, that it was inappropriate for me, and I just couldn't wrap my head around what their problem was, because I was getting so much joy from being exposed to a wide variety of horror stories. Not only did I get a lot of the Disney gateway horror with the fairy tales, Pinocchio, Snow White, Cinderella, all have elements of cruelty and horror in them that, for some reason, because they're animated felt less threatening, but I was seeing all of those movies alongside Black Christmas with Margot Kidder and Olivia Hussey. So it was difficult for me to differentiate from, Margot Kidder getting stabbed to death by a glass unicorn and an evil witch trying to kill somebody with a poison apple.
Mm-hmm.
So those things were all, falling into the same broth of what I loved as the audience for a story.
Mm-hmm. The very first film I ever saw was in the early 60s. I was 4 years old, and with my dad, I watched the original Nosferatu. So,
That's a great one.
Very first film I ever saw, and then shortly thereafter, what do I see? Walt Disney's Babes in Toyland with Tommy Sands and Annette Funicello. So, for me, watching Dust Bunny is like the best of both of those films rolled into one.
Oh, thank you. I think there's something about, whether it's, Babes in Toyland or, Santa Claus versus the Martian.
Oh, yes.
These like the Babes in Toyland with the weird sewer scenes and, by the canals, if I'm remembering correctly. But all of those, there were so many kind of scary elements to these stories that I feel like we've evolved past the tolerance of, so it's a little scary. So there's a spooky scene in this movie. And those things kind of like peaked in the 80s with all of the Amblin horror films.
Mm-hmm.
They were gateway horror films. But I remember seeing Indiana Jones in the Temple of Doom, and when Mola Ram pulls the heart out of a guy's chest and it sets on fire with the power of Kali, I was giddy. And I was giddy in the Goonies when the Fratellis were murdering people left and right and the kids were running for their lives. I loved it because you have this fabulous Dave Grusin score accompanying horrific images, but it all has a click in its heel and an energy that makes it a safe place to be scared. And I think we forget that theaters are a safe place to be scared, and our living rooms are a safe place to be scared. And there's so many real scary things in the world that if we allow ourselves comfortable horror in safe situations, it does give us a little bit of armor to face the real horrors of the world and navigate them through the magic of storytelling.
So I'm curious, Bryan, where did the idea for this story arise? Did you have bunny slippers as a kid and you had them under the bed? Did they come to life at night? Where did this story arise? Because it's a fun story.
Well, it started as an Amazing Stories episode, and we were working on this television series that was all about love letters to Amblin movies of the 80s. So many of them gave me horror. And as we kind of like built out the premise of a little girl hires a hitman to kill the monster under her bed, the notes that we got from Steven Spielberg were all about how is this monster synonymous with Aurora? How is it personal to her story? And we kind of like talked about the one-line plot synopsis, and he was like, dig deeper on Aurora, dig deeper into what connects her to the monster, why is the monster part of her, and how is that going to be the thing that she has to live with in a way that makes it Spielbergian and also unique to the Amblin brand of what he was doing in the 80s with those high-concept storytelling, whether it's E.T. or Poltergeist. There's something about the Spielberg of it all, with the way the story is told, with the gliding moves of the camera, and there's so many kind of influences of a variety of filmmakers, not just filmmakers from the 80s, but also filmmakers from the dawn of cinema when directors were saying, what is this new tool that we have to tell a story with? How can we keep pushing it? How can we be aggressive with what it can do to convey emotion? And so there was, a love of early cinema and the aggressive cinematic qualities of what was happening with the camera and in the 20s and the 30s of the last century, I should say, 100 years ago. And also with that permission to be a little scared was very seductive for me as a storyteller. And, I've told stories like Pushing Daisies that are fairy tales as well. And, and I've told stories like Hannibal that feel much darker, but yet I would look at Hannibal as a very dark comedy as well as a horror story. So all the horror that I consume and I love has an element of levity to it, even in its darkest, most terrifying expressions. I can watch Texas Chainsaw Massacre and go, shit, that is bleak, but it's also a little funny. Because cannibalism is always a little funny.
Of course it is. Whimsy is the word that keeps coming to mind as I was watching the film, and I've seen it 3 times now. So the whimsy in here, and I'm glad you brought up the cinematography, because Nicole does a beautiful job with the lighting and the lensing. You're working for a big part of this film in the narrow hallway corridor. You've got some great stuff happening in the gilded elevators. The lensing, it's just beautiful. It's rich. It's vibrant. There's a lot of Dutching. I love the camera rotations. I'm seeing some of those gliding movements that remind me of like Saul Polito's work with Michael Curtiz.
Wow, thanks.
And all the POVs that are under the bed, floor level, or at Aurora's eye level. That's so key here. You keep us in Aurora's POV. And in doing that, Nicole, she captures the extreme beauty. And I don't know why no Academy Award nominations were announced for Jeremy Reed for production design, because this production design is off the charts. Talk to me about creating this visual splendor with Jeremy, with Nicole, and also with your costumers, Olivier and Catherine. Their costumes are fantastic. And these 3 elements are so interconnected in this film. You can't have one without the other.
Oh, thank you so much. And thank you on behalf of Jeremy and Catherine and Olivier and Nicole. I love all of the building bricks of telling a story. And one of the things that I enjoy most about my job is giving permission for people to go further and indulge themselves. When we would ever have like director meetings on Hannibal, I would say, okay, everything that you wanted to do on a television show but can't do, you can do here. Mm-hmm. This is a place where you can be as pretentious as you want to be. Like you can get into all of those film school pretensions of telling a story and being cinematic in a way that you might not be afforded to do in other circumstances. This is a safe place to go further. And so that was a delight for all of the department heads. Nicole was such a big sister and protector and guidance counselor for me as a first-time director, and provided such a safe place because she's so much smarter and savvier than I am with all of the technical facilities of cinematography, and gave me permission to go further as well. And a lot of the influences of this movie, whether it's, Spanish language fairy tales, the works of Alfonso Cuarón or Guillermo del Toro or French maximalism. These are all kind of vocabulary building films for us as we discuss what we can do and how we can take inspiration of dialing it up to 11 and having the emotional authenticity of the characters' experiences, particularly, Sophie as Aurora, who is so wonderful and reserved in the movie, gives us a coupon to be extra in the production design and the costume design and the cinematography, because what's happening on screen with the people is still relatable and still emotional, and the world that those grounded emotions exist in are heightened, but the emotions and the humanity isn't. So that it feels like that's the balance, is that you can go further with production design and cinematography and costume design if you're grounded in an emotional reality with the actors. So I have to pay respects to the quality of the acting that allowed all of the department heads to have more fun, because the actors are keeping us grounded in what they're doing on screen, and allows us to have crazy wallpaper that moves and have fantastic costumes that are a combination of influences. Olivier was one of my favorite people in the experience of making this movie, and I made a great friend in Olivier, and we bonded very early on because he was like, I want to talk to you about the story, and I want to ask you, are you Aurora or are you the neighbor? Like, who are you in this story? And I was like, I'm always going to be the little girl. Mm-hmm. So, and he was like, I too am that little girl, and here's what happened in my childhood that makes me relate to Aurora. And I was like, here's what happened in my childhood that makes me relate to Aurora. And then we just have the vocabulary emotionally to be able to be additive in terms of the style, because we're both aware of what emotionally needs to be happening on screen, what emotions we're trying to provoke with the audience, and then we get to play with all the colors on top of that.
The colors are spectacular, Bryan, and using them in conjunction with the production design. You've got distinct palettes of gold, of green. The florals in the garden luncheon are spectacular on the green wallpaper that's like reeds that the hippo is moving through. The pinks, the reds, very distinct purposes with your colors. And they pick up on the whimsy that we also hear in your score and with your needle drop selection. So how did you develop your color palette here and put them to their best use that also carries through musically?
Well, we talked a lot about color, and I used the example that if Pushing Daisies is sweet and Hannibal is savory, that this is mango chicken. So It needs to be both sweet and savory. We talked a lot about artists like Mark Ryden, who use pinks and greens in such an interesting way that are subversive to the context of the paintings, and horrible, strange things will be happening, but they're in pinks and greens, so your brain's like, am I comforted by this horror? And I think that the colors give you permission to experience the horror of the story in a less confrontational way, because it's all candy-coated therapy, for lack of a better example. Mm-hmm. And I am a big fan of film music, and I loved collaborating with Isabel Summers on this score. And what was so interesting about our collaboration is that there was a little bit of Isabel comes from rock and roll, and expressions in that kind of category of music. So it was fun to be able to talk to her about Franz Waxman and Lalo Schifrin and these and the very horny kind of grand qualities of the scores for Godzilla, the blah of Godzilla's approach, and how we can incorporate a little bit of Godzilla as well as some, Lalo Schifrin kind of 70s caper music, as well as classic cinematic, Franz Waxman scores, whether it's Bride of Frankenstein or Sunset Boulevard. All of those things create wonderful worlds with rich textures, and then to see how Isabel extrapolates all of those influences that we discussed into tangos that have, a sense of musicality and dance between the characters, as well as real kind of categorically horror expressions, and also fun kind of rompy energies that the disparate kind of influences of her score are collected into this fantastic, cohesive expression. And it's very much synonymous with what's happening visually, is being reflected with what you're experiencing orally.
I mean, come on. When you're getting told you can help me wrap up the body pieces, you need to have whimsical music behind you.
Yes. It's still a children's story.
Yeah, it made me laugh. That actually did make me laugh when Mads deadpans that. You can help me wrap up the pieces. And the music and the instrumentation is so key in the score. Because we have things like flute or piccolo.
Yes, that was there's so many wonderful aspects about making a movie, and the relationships that you get to have with so many different kinds of people from different walks of life, and you hear their influences. It's very much like an improvisational exercise where everybody is yes-anding everything that's been said, and that yes and instinct to improvisation is, because I learned more about writing from the groundlings than any class I took in film school. And the quality that the groundlings teaches you is to listen and to observe and to say yes, and then this could happen. So that is not only a big aspect of how I approach storytelling, but it's a big aspect of how I approach collaborating with wonderful people who know so much more about what they're doing than I do, and I get to absorb all of their genius and add it to my Crayola box of colors.
Well, I quickly would be remiss not to mention Lisa Lasser's editing. Your editing is so spectacular. The pacing is great. When the film ended, I couldn't believe it was over, and I wanted more.
I've worked with Lisa since Wonder Falls, which was in the early aughts, so like 2004. So I worked with Lisa on Wonder Falls. I worked with Lisa on Pushing Daisies, and tried to work with her many times since, and then we finally got to work together again on Pushing Daisies. Not only is she a delight to be in the room with, there is something about editing a film that is so different to doing it on television and so comprehensive. She is a producer. She's not just an editor. She is producing post. She is keeping everything going. And I was very fortunate to work with many, many wonderful women on this movie.
I noticed that. Most of your department heads, you're working with women. Which is... Yes,
I mean, I'm a gay man, so I love women, and there is a shorthand between gay men and women, and there's something about being a gay man and working with women that you're not, there's no other agenda beyond connecting to the person and doing good work. And so there's, I'm always drawn to working with women.
Everybody was able to stay in Aurora's POV, that female gaze, and childlike creativity. You're still a child at heart, Bryan. It is obvious.
I don't want to grow up. I'm a Toys R Us kid.
I want to see more from you directing. I want to see more of this explosive creativity from you, because this is just spectacular. I love it. I just love it.
Thank you.
Oh,
More to come. More to come.
I hope so. Bryan, thank you so much. This has been so wonderful getting to talk with you about Dust Bunny. I could keep going for a while with you on other elements in the film.
Well, if you find when you're writing that you have additional questions, don't hesitate to reach out. I'm happy to get on the phone again with you.
Oh, Bryan, thank you so much, and I'll remember that. Thank you, and you go have a wonderful rest of your day.
Thank you. You too.
Bye-bye. And that was Bryan Fuller talking about Dust Bunny. Now, if you haven't seen Dust Bunny yet, run to your couch now, get comfy, because it's available right now on digital. It's funny, it's fun, it's gorgeous, it's colorful, and come on, Sigourney Weaver is hilarious in 4-inch stilettos that turn into guns. How can you say no to that? So that is all the time we have today. No Oscar trivia today. I'll have some for you next week. But before we go, a big congratulations to Steven Spielberg on picking up a Grammy Award this weekend, making him, I think it's the 28th EGOT in history. And you may wonder, what category was the Grammy in? Best Music Film for producing music by John Williams. So, kind of in a sense, John Williams just, as an aside, picked up another Grammy for himself, too. So, I'll be back next week with more insightful interviews, interesting films, and hopefully my interview with renowned Egyptologist, Dr. Zahi Hawass. I'll have that for you. It was delayed again due to his travel. First, it was delayed because of the internet was down in Cairo, Egypt. We rescheduled it, but then he was traveling. So we've had to reschedule it again for this coming week. So I'm crossing my fingers and toes. Maybe I should be praying to the Pharaoh. I'm not sure. But I'm determined that we will get this interview, because the film, The Man with the Hat, the documentary is so spectacular. So, go check out The Strangers Chapter 3 in theaters this weekend. Sit at home. Be comfortable. Watch Dust Bunny. So, until next week, I'm Debbie Elias. This is Behind the Lens.